believe Russell Westbrook is playing in the wrong era, okay? And weirdly enough, I think that if Russell Westbrook played in the 1970s or the 1980s or the 1990s or maybe even in the early 2000s, I think his greatness would be much more appreciated. Now, let me be very clear. Russell Westbrook has had a great career up to this point so far. Not quite an all-time great career, but a very good to great career so far. In his 11 years in the NBA, he's won a league MVP. He's a 9-time All-Star, a 2-time scoring champion, and he's led the league in assists 3 times. And he just recently became the triple-double king, where he passed Oscar Robertson for most triple-doubles all time. And 3 of the last 4 seasons, Russell Westbrook has averaged a triple-double. That is unprecedented and very impressive. But see, the things you hear about Russell Westbrook from his biggest critics, and some of these things are fair, some of these things aren't fair, but the things you hear are he's a stat patter, he's selfish, not a great shooter. You know, back in the 1980s per se, there was no social media around to really magnify every little misstep that these players, have. That's just the reality. And I really think that back in the 80s and the 90s, most fans, because they didn't have social media, or at least because social media really wasn't relevant at the time, a lot of people focused on what everyone's great at and what players were good at rather than what they can't do. And I think a lot of times when we talk about Russell Westbrook, we talk about the things that he can't do, but we don't appreciate the things he can do enough. Okay? And everyone these days has a voice. Everyone out there, it seems like, has a podcast. Everyone has a Twitter account, Instagram account. If you want your opinion to be out there, it can be put out there. You can be heard if you want to be heard. Hey, I started a show right here, and I feel like I've been heard across the world in ways that I probably wouldn't have been heard, if I lived in the 1980s and didn't have a MacBook Pro or a camera or a iPhone 10 or whatever iPhone I have. I think I have an iPhone X. Not quite sure. But either way, I benefit from technology. And I just think that a lot of people magnify what Russ Westbrook can do rather than what he can do, because everyone talks about how Russell Westbrook's a stat pattern because of the triple-doubles, when in reality, his teams win 75% of the games that when he gets a triple-double. Well, let me rephrase that. When Russell Westbrook gets a triple-double, the team he's on usually wins about 75% of the games. That has been proven through statistics. Go look it up, people. Okay? And a long time ago, back in the 80s and the 90s, it was okay for you to be not a great shooter. It really was. A lot of players were flawed. The 3-ball was not a big incremented part in most offenses. But because of Steph Curry and these great 3-point shooters, and because of, the great training everyone gets, and because players are more skilled than ever, players like Russell Westbrook are going to get nitpicked for not being able to shoot. And the reality is Russell Westbrook, he relies a lot on his athletic ability, and he's not the best shooter. Okay? Hasn't always had the best feel for the game. I think that in the 80s and 90s, Russell Westbrook would really just plow through everyone and use his athletic ability, and he would be the most athletic player by far and away if he was born in the 70s and 80s and was dropped in that era of basketball. Okay? I should say when he was dropped in the era of basketball. Okay, that's what I meant. If he was dropped in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, he'd be easily, by far and away, the most explosive athlete on the court at all times. And right now, today, he pretty much is that guy on most nights. But now you have LeBron. You have Zion Williamson. You got Kevin Durant. You got these other physical specimens that are maybe not as athletic as Russell Westbrook, but they're pretty darn athletic. the gap in talent between each player in today's NBA is not wide at all. And I think Russell Westbrook, like I said, I think that he's playing in the wrong era. I think that if he played in the 70s and 80s or 90s, he would definitely be much more appreciated because the flaws that he has would not be frowned upon as much or magnified as much back in those days because, well, the game of basketball, quite frankly, was much more different, and there wasn't as much social media to point out the bad things. So that's how I feel about Russell Westbrook right now. I think he's a really great player, but I think that a lot of people would feel even better about him or appreciate his greatness a little bit more if he played in a different era. To me, sadly, even though Russell Westbrook is going to be a Hall of Famer one day, no doubt about it, I believe Russell Westbrook is playing in the wrong era for all the reasons that I mentioned.
Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juiciest Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juiciest Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.